after, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. And I think we will go ahead and start the recording now. Thank you, JJ. I appreciate that. And just one last reminder to mute your microphones and your telephones. And if you're on the telephone, please don't put us on hold. The other thing is we are, as may realize, recording this session, and we will share that recording as well as the PowerPoints. The other thing that I want to mention to everyone is that we'll be monitoring the chat box for those of you that have record or access to the chat box. That's a nice quick way to get any questions in that you might have as we're going along. If you have any, if you're on the telephone though, or you don't feel like it's too difficult to type that question in the chat box, please feel free to unmute and ask your question as we move along. And so today who we have presenting on this System Office Grievance Process and Procedures is myself. I'm J.W. Kelly, and I serve as the Associate Vice President for Student Services here at the System Office. And I don't believe that General Counsel Jonathan Harris is on the line yet. He is?
I'm here.
All right, yay. So glad to have you able to join us as well. And then we also have Dr. J.J. Evans with us, who's usually the front man when it comes to processing and working through student grievances and complaints as we receive them here at the System Office. So you guys are stuck with the three of us here this afternoon on a Friday afternoon, kind of cold and rainy. So we thank you for joining us. The next slide there you can see is our agenda for the day. We're just going to kind of go a little over the federal regulations just as a review, and then kind of what the complaint portal looks like from our perspective, because you guys really won't be engaged in that very much at all. And then we'll hear some feedback and do a Q&A. Very general, before I turn the mic over to John, is that really we have two goals for today's session, and one is to very clearly communicate to each of you that there is no policy or law or regulation changes, that all of those are as normal. So nothing has changed when it comes from a legal or policy or regulation perspective. So we want to make sure we clearly communicate that. That's number one goal. Number two goal is we just want to be very transparent with the System Office policies, or not policies, but procedures on how we engage with students and then engage with your campuses when we do receive complaints or grievances. And so those are the two goals. One, and again, I'm going to repeat it again just to make sure everybody got it. Number one is there's no policy or law changes. And number two is we want to be very transparent about the procedures and how we engage with students and with campuses. So I'll pause there and we'll turn the mic over to John to kind of cover the federal regulations that are the foundation of all of this. John?
Sure. Thanks for that. Again, as JW said, there hasn't been any real changes in the law or anything like that. What prompted a lot of the UNC to develop this portal was California got into a bit of trouble with U.S. Department of Ed over not having a, make a long story short, robust enough complaint response that's required by these federal regulations that are on the screen. And again, what as everyone can read here at the highlighted parts, I would not torture everybody by reading word for word federal regulations, but in order to qualify for the programs under the Higher Education Act, you need to be what's called an eligible institution. And on the second part of this slide, it's talking about what does it mean to be an eligible institution? Well, you have to be, quote, legally authorized to provide an educational program beyond secondary education. And we go to the next slide. Thanks. The last part of that reg is an institution is legally authorized if the state has a process to review and appropriately act on complaints concerning the institution including enforcing applicable state laws. So what that means, if you put all three of these together, is to remain eligible for those programs under the Higher Education Act, a state has got to have a process to review and act on complaints from institutions. So again, as JW said, this is not a new reg by any means. And the point behind transitioning to this system is, again, to provide some better record keeping on the system office end and for the colleges as well, just to make sure that we're in compliance. And I think, as Dr. Evans will probably describe later on in the presentation, nothing's really changed at our process either about the type of review we would be doing here at the system office. Again, we don't have any legal authority to overturn a decision that a college has made. But again, law says we have to have some mechanism where we're looking or reviewing on these complaints and have an intake system for that, which this new portal is intended to do. And again, the part here about enforcing applicable state laws, again, the community college system office and our community colleges don't enforce the law. That falls on our attorney general, which we have a part in the portal about referring anything that is related to a legal complaint or something that they think is in violation of the law. That would go to the Consumer Protection Division of the AG's office.
So I think, John, if it's all right with you, that might be a good place to pause briefly just to see if there are any questions. And just to recap, federally, to be federally compliant, we must have a state level process to review student complaints and grievances. However, the system office still does not have the authority to overturn any decisions that are made at the local college campus. Are there any questions or comments at this point? All right. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate, John. Thank you for doing that work and getting that research done for us. Hopefully, you can kind of listen in a little bit just in case we get some questions later on, sir. We would appreciate that. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to JJ for him to talk a little bit about what it looks like when we're contacted by a student, and how we progress in our process and procedure, and then how we track that with the new complaint portal. So Dr. Evans, the mic is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Conversations surrounding this complaint portal really started, I'll say, about 2 years ago. They convened a panel of parties from the private university system, the community college system, the UNC system, as well as our proprietary institutions, to figure out a way to have a comprehensive portal in which all complaints are submitted. And I will put the link to the portal in the chat box if you'd like to see what it looks like on your side in an alternate window. I did take some screenshots here. So when students are directed to this website, you'll see here the language here is in compliance with state regulations and rules. This portal is really implemented to provide timely and effective response for students submitting complaints and grievances. Again, all of the higher ed or secondary education systems are submitting complaints and grievances through this portal. And so this will be sort of the main thoroughfare for information to be disseminated to each of our agencies. The first thing that a student is notified after they sort of read through all the languages, they must exhaust all opportunities to seek resolution of their grievance locally first before uploading documents and information to the portal. There are some questions here to that also sort of to ensure that happens. And if a student submits a grievance before going through their local process, they'll just be filtered and redirected back to the local institution. In terms of the information that a student is submitting, obviously their name, their contact information, which higher education agency they are complaining about, what type of complaint, and then here they're providing either detailed information or uploading documents that were either sent to them as a result of a grievance locally or so some students have, submitted transcripts or letters that are from, the dean of the president's office or the student conduct officer, et cetera. Once they click submit, there is an electronic signature. They are given a unique ID code to log back into the portal as the person here at the system office updates where the grievance is. And so on our side of the fence, once a complaint is received, we have the opportunity to notify where the complaint is to the student so that the student knows it's either under institution review, it's under the system office review, or it has been completely reviewed and therefore the case has been closed. And so just a quick description of what this process looks like is a student would submit information to the portal. That information notifies us via email to go log in, download that information. That information is compiled along with any of the attachments or documentation that we receive. We then will reach out to the institution's student conduct officer or vice president, or I guess it really depends on the type of complaint. Some are student services in nature, some are academic in nature. And so depending on where the grievance falls is sort of helps us determine who we contact at the institution. We also notify the student that we have received the complaint and that we are going through our process of review in order to ensure that the student sort of is heard and knows where we are. The institution is given an opportunity to respond or upload documents or emails or any other prior documentation that was either included in their initial case or through a follow-up or an appeal. We take all that information, we upload it to the portal. There are two components to that. So there are public documents that are shared to everyone, including the student. And then there are private internal documents that the institution can send that are just a part of the complaint record. And so the student will not have access to those. The student won't see those. Those are just for internal documentation in case, we've had complaints this year that are from, 5 or 6 years back. So that will allow us from a historical perspective to go in, pull some of those documents, understand either sort of the context of what took place at that time and have all of that information with us before reaching back out to the institution should we need to do so. The student is notified through the portal that a resolution has been given, whether they are going to be given an opportunity to either appeal or the institution's decision will be upheld. And then ultimately the case is closed and filed away in our records. Before we jump to the next slide, are there any questions about this process?
I think it's kind of related to the process, but we do have a question, and for the benefit of people on the phone, I want to make sure I read that, JJ. Natasha asked or comments that by legal definition, there is a clear distinction between a grievance, a discriminatory claim, and a complaint. Are these interchangeably used for this purpose of reporting? And I answered her basically, yes, we are considering all complaints, grievances, concerns that are brought to us, we're treating them all the same because the power and the authority really remains with the institution. Our primary role is to kind of hear from the students so they feel heard and understood. And then we try to identify with the institution where that student should be in the due process at that institution. And that would be different depending on what their complaint's about. If it's a grade appeal, it could be one thing. If it's a general complaint, it could be something else. And then, like Natasha mentioned, if it's a true grievance because of discriminatory allegations, then that would be a whole different process. So instead of us trying to know what all those different processes are at all 58, our goal is to work with the institution and the student to get that student on the right path. Do we have any other questions or anything?
So thus far, over the last, we'll say, year and a half, 2 years, we went through our records and tried to identify the types of cases that we've seen escalate to the system office. And here you'll see everything from grade appeals to dismissals, suspensions, other conduct violations. There have been a number of Title IV or transcript issues where, a student owes money to the institution and it doesn't feel that the records are accurate or whatever the case may be. Other complaints around ADA accommodations, or they feel that the process that they went through locally wasn't fair or that they weren't heard. And so these are just a few of the types of complaints that we receive generally. Sometimes students try to jump to the system office before going through the local process. And again, we do our best to make sure that we redirect them to their local process and place them in contact with their the local student, either conduct or grievance officer, again, just depending on the type of case that we are seeing. And the last thing we are going to suggest.
JJ, if I could jump in, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. The only other thing I would add to that list is one that is an example we just recently had. Or there are times where students are so agitated with their circumstances that they call a variety of people, whether it's the governor's office or a legislator, the president, and the system office president. And so we find ourselves receiving information from those entities and then needing to reply to those entities on not necessarily the details of the case, but that we're working the case and that and then when it's come to the case being closed. So just wanted to make sure you guys knew that there many times, as JJ said, that people jump all the way to who they think is the people of power that can get them what they desire. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that even in those situations, when it's a call from the governor's office, our first step is to contact the college and to get that student on the due process path. We do have a question here in the chat box, and it reads, at the bottom of the form, should the student also grant permission for the institution to submit documentation to the system office? JJ, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or John Harris. I think our assumption at this point has been that if they contact us and initiate a relationship with us, that there is a formal appeal, then we've accepted that as permission that information can be shared between your institution and our agency. Mr. Harris, do you feel like that's a solid interpretation, or do we need a checkbox to clarify that students can share information, or at the college can share student information, excuse me?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. maybe the three of us could have a discussion about that later. Yeah, I don't have the form in front of me right now, but I think that's a great question though, because again, when you're talking about permissions and getting it from different parties, that may be one. I can't remember if we had thought that was covered or not, but I think we can promise the person who asked the question. I think that's Audrey Sherrill, that we'd get back to her with that answer. But great question.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up, Audrey. We'll definitely research it a little more, and we may need to take that action. So, any other questions before we move on?
Some of the local changes you may want to consider are, I also will include this link to the System Office website where we've updated our webpage for grievances and complaints, is to review your language for your handbooks or catalogs or websites for any complaint documentation that may point to I guess what we'll deem as our old process, or that is not updated with the current web portal and current process, to update those as well. If you have any other documentation in software such as Maxion or any of the other options to track your own local complaints or documentation, or explaining the process for students, as well as any NC SARA or online documentation, we ask you to please review those and have those updated for the current academic year, especially if you're in the process of doing that for your handbook and catalog for the 2021-2022 year and moving forward. There are probably some other places where documentation or information regarding complaints hide at your institution. So this will be a great opportunity to do some I guess spring cleaning and just make sure that all the information that is on your side, as well as the information that you're linking to our website and our new web page, is current and up to date. And with that, I believe that's our last slide. We'll pause here for any further questions or insights.
Well, we had blocked a full hour, not knowing, well, we knew we didn't have a presentation that would last a full hour. However, we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time blocked on everybody's calendars in case there was conversation and dialogue and discussion that warranted sufficient time to have that conversation. And so I think I'm kind of stalling, just to be honest, to see if there's any other questions or comments in the chat box, because we, just like Audrey's comment, we value your expertise in the field in dealing, especially with complaints and grievances, and we would hate to put a procedure in place that puts you in a predicament. And so please let us know if you have any insights, thoughts, suggestions, recommendations. You can please feel free to shoot those to either JJ or myself. That would be very, very helpful. We're seeing a couple of comments pop up in the chat box now. Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate that, and for the thank you, and definitely you're welcome. And then Kim Hill has a question: do you have language you would like for colleges to use to be consistent? JJ, you want to take that one?
So I was actually typing that response in the chat. The language that's on the website has been approved by our general counsel, Mr. Harris, and is probably the most clear and accurate language to use in this particular circumstance.
right. So we'll give it another 15 seconds or so to see if there's any questions, either those of you on the telephone or on the computer, or to put in the chat box. Okay, not hearing any or seeing any. We want to thank everybody for your time this afternoon. We thank you for your patience, and we also thank you for your service to the students. We know that your direct work with students is an amazing thing, that you are highly motivated. We know most of you, and that you really desire to see students have success and to be able to do great things. And hopefully, um, we can support you in those efforts. We encourage all of you to stay safe and stay healthy. And thank you for your work. Have a great weekend.